Kia ora, and welcome to our second cafe session dedicated to giving you a quick overview of Gifted 101. This session is all about our second chunk of work in Gifted 101. That's about strengths and sticking points. So, welcome and a karakia as we begin. Tu taua mai I runga, tu taua mai I raro, tu taua mai I roto, tu taua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tai kie. Welcome to everyone from all of the places. So, thank you for joining us. I hope you've been enjoying Gifted 101 so far. The first module was all about 3 really simple ideas. Gifted is, gifted and gifted is not. But they are deceptively simple, obviously. So I'd just like you to take a moment to reflect back on what you've already tried. Have you chatted with some learners? Have you explored the neurodivergent learner characteristics tool? Have you watched some of those videos with learners? How is that all going? What insights have you gained? Just take a moment, pause the video if you need to stop and chat and or write some things down or reflect. How's it been going so far? Importantly, what questions have you got now? Those would be great to tackle. Okay. This module is all about strengths and sticking points, the things about our gifted learners that are great and conversely not so great. If you ask gifted kids about their experience of giftedness, they will tell you the great and not so great come hand in hand. Sometimes they are the flip side of the same coin. So, as I said earlier, a great thing to have on hand is your learner characteristics tool, because that really does force you to look at the strengths and sticking points in different areas as almost, not always perfectly, but the same coin, different sides, right? Sometimes it depends on our perspective. So we've got more, this is a little bit more about how that tool works. It's all in that notice, recognize, respond framework. You're going to be noticing things about your learners and recognize that the things you're seeing may not be active or conscious behavioral choices. They might be fairly, I'd like to say automatic. It's not quite the right way, but fairly subconscious actions that learners are taking. They might be actions that learners are taking in order to regulate. They might be actions a learner is taking out of boredom or discomfort with their environment, bearing in mind that boredom is literally toxic for our gifted kids. But understanding that those things are a result of brain-based differences, not a child who's being deliberately difficult and not a child who's deliberately trying to give you a challenging job. I think that's a really important thing, that we recognize some of those things come out of brain-based differences. And then the tool gives you some ideas about what you could try out. There's obviously not every idea under the sun, but just 2 or 3 different things that you might try out in your classroom, and not on an individualized basis, but you might try with your whole class or a group and see what happens. As teachers, we are really great at taking ideas and going, I'll try this, but I'll try it in art, or I'll try this with these learners in this way. We're really great at testing out ideas. So we've provided you in this tool with some starting points for you to bounce off. Let me give you an example. So the tool is arranged around 10 different areas. There's things like learning, thinking, interacting with peers, interacting with adults. This example is in our section all about doing. So you might notice that you have a learner who is really capable of expressing themselves when they're making comic strips. They are clever and witty and pointed and interesting and very, very cool. But ask them to write the same ideas in a story, it's not happening, right? That's a strength, but also a sticking point at the same time. You might notice learners who don't seem to have the physical dexterity needed to do handwriting. They seem clumsy or difficult or awkward. So depending on what you're seeing, there's a couple of strategies you might try. Lots of options, lots of hands-on, lots of comic stripping. It's a valid form of expression, or lots of tech-enabled or tech-powered activities. Build them through. See what happens. If that doesn't work, try something else. Lots of movement activities might be a go. So the tool works by doing exactly this: notice, recognize, and respond in 10 different areas to help you get thinking about strengths and sticking points. A great tool to have at hand when you're sitting thinking, there's something about this kid that just is not working well or working incredibly well. I wonder what I could do. Okay. Another wee example of this idea that strengths and sticking points can kind of sometimes be exactly the same thing. So you might have a brain that sees all of the possibilities. So when you say write a story about dogs, which you probably wouldn't, but let's take that as an example and go with it, that this child is thinking of every dog breed they've ever heard of in every creative situation that dogs could possibly be in, and when dogs go to the moon and when dogs run parliament, the possibilities are endless. But you might actually notice that behaving or looking like a squirrel brain, where those brains are just pinging off idea after idea after idea after idea, and they are not linear. They are just moving really rapidly in a really quick direction. And that what you see as a result is someone who looks really unfocused or really dreamy or inattentive or off task. Maybe that brain is really busy, and maybe that brain is just bouncing around with so many ideas. You might get learners who, gifted learners can often do this really well. They see the big picture, the big umbrella of ideas. So you might be talking about apples, but they are getting this big picture of nature and growth and systems and the interconnection of everything. And in a discussion, they might leap from talking about apples, for instance, to talking about the impact of Chernobyl and the wolves. And you might see those two ideas and go, there's no connection there. That's a very unusual tangent. Maybe this child wasn't listening. Maybe they were just off in a dream world. You generate a whole lot of maybes around that idea. But for that child, that's not an unusual tangent. It's a logical, natural consequence of that big picture that we were talking about. So depending on how we look at it and how our classroom can support strengths and work around possible sticking points, we can see strengths and sticking points as two sides of the same coin. Okay. One of the particular areas we might notice in our gifted kids is intense minds, these brains that just want to learn. This is classically known as rage to learn, where actually those brains are basically desperate in the way a hungry tummy needs food An intense mind just needs to learn. They don't like being slowed down. They often don't like being told what to learn, how to learn, when to learn. They would rather just go and learn. They can deep dive given time and space, and sometimes a little bit of skill support. Those minds need to go deeper, and they need to be able to access the complex picture. So that difference between apples and the interconnectedness of all things in a systems approach, that's what I mean by the complex end. That gifted brain may not be satisfied in learning about apples, but will be more satisfied learning about apples through the lens of the interconnection of all things in a systems approach, right? They need that additional complexity. They also have a natural tendency towards abstraction. And that apples and systems example is another good one for that. An apple is a concrete thing. It's an easy thing to look at, think about, do things to. Those gifted brains do have a natural preference towards thinking in the abstract. So thinking through ideas, thinking about ideas, thinking with ideas, connecting the concrete apples to those bigger ideas is where those gifted brains want to go. So as teachers, we need to be prepared to add depth, add complexity, and add that abstraction in for learners who need that. We can do that not by saying, oh, you over there, because you're in this zone, you need to do X, Y, Z. Additionally, you build it in for everyone and see who rises to it and see who looks at you going, what's she talking about? You throw it out to everyone to see who will take it, and then you run with the people who are taking that abstraction or that more complex idea. They've naturally selected that, so carry on with them. Our gifted kids also love to work at a faster and also slower pace. Now, this is really paradoxical. Our gifted kids are capable of moving through content really quickly, especially when it's fairly straightforward content. So we need to let them move quickly. We can't let our gifted kids be very, very slowly plodding through things at a pace that feels too slow to them. It will be uncomfortable, it will be difficult, and they will not be happy brains. However, the flip side of that is when things get good and challenging, when there's good meaty learning to be done, learning that's deep and complex and abstract, that's when those learners want to slow down and go really deeply and really intensely into that content. So their pace slows right down, and they might move very slowly through quite challenging content. And that's okay. Gifted kids don't have to work at a consistently incredibly fast pace. You will know, you'll be able to tell through what they're doing when they are ready to actually, let's dig in, let's slow down right here. You'll see it, you'll feel it, they will tell you if you are watching. It's a paradox about pace, too fast, too slow, but it's one we have to keep in mind as teachers. So, question for you, how are you feeding those intense minds? Are you giving them lots of nutritious, meaty, complex learning to dig into, learning that slows them down by being challenging and deep for them? It's a good question to be able to think through. Okay. Our gifted kids and also other kids with other neurodiversities, often develop incredibly passionate interests. And these are not often curriculum focused interests. They are often quite niche. Worms, or the geology of a particular region at a particular time, or My favorite dictator can be another niche interest area. They are often quite small and really specialized interests, and those interests can be quite fleeting. So I want to learn a whole lot about a whole lot of this right now, or they can be really long-lived. So you might have a dinosaur fan who starts falling in love with dinosaurs as a really small person, age 3, and continues their lifelong passion for dinosaurs right into their tertiary years. Either is completely fine. It's really important for those intense minds that we can identify and respond to and feed those passionate interests. We need to help those kids connect with other people who have equally passionate interests, either in their same area of interest. So you might not find another kid who dives into who my favorite dictator is, but you might find another kid who has a favorite king or queen or royal household or a favorite military leader. That's similar enough to find a connection. Doesn't have to be exactly the same, but connecting passionate kids with other passionate kids is really important, and helping them, leading them, supporting them to share their passion. If you have a young gifted kid who is giving you a mini lecture on a particular species of worms and how long they live and how they breed and where they live and what they eat and don't eat, and you're getting that wonderful lecture, that's a love language. You are a special and trusted human. So nod and smile and respond with absolute joy, because that gifted brain has enjoyed learning all that really interesting stuff, and now they're keen to share that joy with you. You're lucky. So let them share the joy. Give them lots of platforms to share the joy. Let them talk to the class. Let them talk to another special interest group. Let them share it at assembly if they are that way inclined. Absolutely find ways that they can share that passionate interest with other people. Hot tip, a free program run by us at the Neurodiversity and Education Project is called Clubs. Free for kids to join. Find out more on our website, neurodiversity.org.nz, and look for clubs. It's the perfect avenue to engage kids in those passionate interest areas. Okay. Fine. Your question is then to try and find out what your learners are passionately interested in, and then think together about how you can build those interests. The resource we have for you to try is our project planner that helps you work with the learner to develop a project around that passionate interest, because it can be something that they want to do, but they don't really know how, or they plan something that's, I'm going to build a nuclear reactor, which isn't feasible or possible. It tanks, obviously, and then, it's the end of the world and no one's happy at all. So learning to plan a project, doing that together, can be a really great exercise. Okay. This is a really interesting one for our gifted kids, is the idea of big emotions. The big emotions of our gifted kids are because of brain-based differences. Literally, the emotional part of the brain and the intellectual processing part of the brain are hyper-connected. One doesn't happen without the other. Emotions and intellectual processing always happen together. Right? It is no wonder our gifted kids have experienced, demonstrate, etc., big emotions. And what do we mean by big emotions? It's not that those emotions are out of control. It is that they are felt very, very strongly. They are big, right? The word big in that statement is not hyperbole. It's precise. These are felt very strongly. Our gifted kids often also experience a huge range of emotions. They don't often stick in the range of our basic or universal emotions. The emotions they experience can be really nuanced and really complex. One kid described to me recently how she was feeling a cross between frustrated, annoyed, and confused, but probably leaning towards angry also. Right? That's a hard emotion to pin down, but you can see how what she was feeling was nuanced. She wasn't just feeling cross, right? It had a lot of range in it. Our gifted kids can also be highly aware, not just of their own emotions, so emotional sensitivity about themselves, but aware of emotions in others and can be highly sensitive to and reactive to other people's emotions. So that's where a gifted kid can walk into a room and kind of soak up the emotional vibe of a room and take on those emotions, perhaps without really understanding that they are doing that. So they have that high level of awareness and sensitivity. It is really important for us as teachers to teach with and about and through emotions as just a natural, normal part of our lives. In terms of curriculum, we can bring this in through health and PE and all sorts of other areas you can tie it into. But it is absolutely essential that kids learn emotional fluency, how to think about their emotions, how to analyze them, that they know where emotions come from. Right? They don't happen by magic. They come from somewhere. They are made in the brain. Teaching kids about that is really important. And then we can think about teaching regulation strategies. And it's not controlling emotions, it's just actually learning not to have enormous responses, learning just to dial it down when it's needed. Okay. So part of that is having your own well-regulated emotional environment in your classroom. This is a really big deal. It is so important for us as teachers to know that we set the emotional tone. There's a cafe session on this coming up later. Do have a watch of that. And it also includes strategies for teaching regulation. Yeah, because it's not something that just happens because you have a well-regulated environment, something that happens when you teach it as well in that well-regulated environment. So have a think about what you already do and where your gaps might be. Okay, and that's it for this module of Gifted 101, all about strengths and sticking points, intense minds, passionate interests, and big emotions. I hope you really enjoy this module, learn heaps, try out heaps of new things in your classroom or your context with your learners. Karakia for us to close. Kia tau te rangi Māori, ki runga inga iwi o te ao. Thank you so much for joining me. Come again next time and we'll look at module 3, which is all about 3 things that we know really work with our gifted kids. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.